Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to install the Icon Attitude Adjustment Collar for this 2017 Ford Raptor. Now we're going to put 37s on this truck, so we're going to adjust it all the way up to its max height, which is 2¼ inches in the front. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're on the passenger side of the truck. We have the wheels and tires off. And the first thing that we need to do is remove the brake line bracket from our knuckle. That's going to be a 10mm. We'll just pull that out. That's just to give us a little bit of extra slack when we get our strut out. Next, we're going to use an 8mm and take off our ABS bracket as well. Next, we're going to use a 21mm socket to remove the nut holding on our tie rod. So as you can see, the tie rod is captured in the knuckle. So what we need to do is take a sledge and hit the side of the knuckle to release this, and then we can pull it out. Next, we're going to remove the 18mm nut that's holding our upper control arm to our knuckle. And again, you can see our upper control arm is captured, so we're going to strike the side of the knuckle with our sledge to get this loose. Now just be careful, you only want to strike the knuckle, don't hit the upper control arm, it could damage it. Now I'm going to use a pry bar on our strut, and that's just to hold the upper control arm so I can take this nut off and it doesn't spring out on me. Next, we're going to use an 18mm to disconnect our sway bar end link from our sway bar. Next, we're going to remove the bolt that's holding the lower part of our strut to our lower control arm. That's going to be a 27mm wrench on the head of the bolt and a 30mm socket on the nut. So once you get the nut off, you're going to want to just put that aside. You're going to want to keep that. We're going to reuse it. And to get the bolt out, we're going to use a 27mm socket on the head, and then we're just going to pull it out. And again, keep that, we're going to reuse it. Next, we're going to remove the 3 nuts at the top of our strut. Those are going to be 18mm, and it's going to be kind of tight, but we're just going to use a ratcheting wrench with a flex head, and you should be able to get in there. Now our last nut is going to be kind of hard to see, even harder to get to, but you should be able to get a wrench on there, and then it's just going to be a little bit at a time. Now with a lot of patience, the last nut is ready to come off, and then we can remove the strut from the truck. Now to get the strut out, you're going to need a pry bar. And what we're going to do is pry up on it and then pry down on the control arm. Once you get the bottom free from the lower control arm, the top will just fall out. Okay guys, so we have our strut in our strut compressor now, and the first thing that we need to do is make some aligning marks. So starting at the top, just going to draw a straight line down like that. We're going to draw it down to the first coil, and then we're going to go down and do the same thing at the bottom. So the bottom coil here, and then we're going to go straight down like that. And that's so when we compress all this stuff, and we go to put it back together, we want it to be aligned the same way. So now we're going to have to compress our strut quite a bit depending on what configuration you're going to go with. We're going to go with our full height on this, which is the 2 1/4 inch lift in the front. So we're going to have to compress it down pretty far. But once you have it compressed, everything's loose, what we're going to do is take a mallet and we're going to have to hit up on this bottom portion so that it pops up, and then there's going to be 2 retaining clips that are going to fall out, and that's what we're looking for. You can use a small piece of wood to help out. You're just going to go on all sides and do that. Eventually you should start to see it come up. Again, just be patient with it, keep checking. So once you get it up high enough, you'll see your retaining clips start to fall. There should be 2 of them, 1 on each side. There's the other one. And now if you look at the bottom, you can see the divot in the shock itself. And our new piece is going to fit right in there. Now depending on which configuration you want will depend on how much higher you have to go. So we're going to have the highest configuration, so we have to fill this much room still going up. So we still have a ways to go. Now with our lower seat pushed up out of the way, we're going to make sure both sides of our collar are oriented the same way. And we want to make sure that the grooves line up and that it can't go up or down. And then I'm also going to make sure that my correct icon side is going to be facing out. So once I have that the way I want it, get both sides on, and then we're going to use our provided Allen bolts, go back through each side, get those started by hand first, and then we can go ahead and tighten those up. It's going to be 2 on each side. Now we can use a 6mm Allen key to tighten these down. Now when you tighten this collar down, there is going to be a gap on both sides, and we want to make sure that we don't tighten one side down further than the other one. We want to make sure the gap is even on both sides. So kind of tighten each side together. And then once we have each side equal, we can torque it down. So now that we have our collar torqued down to 20 foot-pounds, we're going to realign all of our points. So we can just turn this, make sure that's fully aligned, and then we can go back to the top, turn that piece, make sure it's aligned. And then once we have everything aligned, we can go ahead and release the strut compressor. Next, we're going to put our top shim plate on, if that's the configuration that you're using. That's just going to fit right on over the top of our studs. It's only going to fit one way. And then we're going to reinstall our strut the same way we removed it. Now we're going to take the top and put that in first. Just lift that up, line up our holes. And hopefully get that into its spot. Now you might have to have the help of a friend or a pry bar. Okay. So now we almost have it in there. Now we're going to need to use a pry bar to get it the rest of the way. Try not to break your hands in the process. Next, we're going to use a provided flange nut with some blue Loctite, and we're going to install those on our 3 studs on the top of our strut. We'll get those started by hand first, and then we'll go through and tighten them up. Now we're going to use a 15mm ratcheting wrench to tighten those down. Next, we're going to put our lower strut bolt in. Again, we might need a pry bar for this to pry the strut into place. And then we're just going to use our factory nut. We're just going to leave that loose for right now. Next, we're going to reinstall our tie rod. It's our factory nut. And we'll just leave it loose for right now. Next, we need to reinstall our upper control arm to our knuckle. To do that, you're going to need to take a pry bar, stick it into your strut coil, pull down on your upper control arm until you can see some threads, and then we're just going to thread on our factory nut. Next, we can reinstall the nut on our sway bar end link. And then we can go back through and tighten everything down to factory spec. We can use an 18mm to tighten up our sway bar end link to our sway bar. Next, we're going to tighten down our upper control arm to our knuckle. We're going to use an 18mm on the nut and an 8mm on the ball joint. We're going to use a 21mm to tighten down our tie rod. Next, we're going to tighten down the bolt holding our strut to our lower control arm. Again, that's a 27mm on the head of the bolt and a 30mm on the nut. Next, we're going to reinstall our brake line bracket with our factory bolt. Tighten that down with a 10mm. And then we can also reinstall our ABS line bracket with our factory bolt and tighten that down with an 8mm. Next, we need to repeat all those steps on the other side and then immediately take the truck to the alignment shop. Alright guys, so we just got the truck back from the alignment shop. We did have to do some minor trimming in the back front fender well, but that's going to complete the installation. If you have any questions, give us a call or visit us online.